Hi, everybody. Joe Chaffee on this Monday, President's Day, as we take a look at the changes that have occurred from yesterday, where we had another round of record highs across a good portion of the Northeast, particularly around the New Jersey, New York City, southeastern Pennsylvania area down into Maryland and Virginia. Numerous records went down with temperatures in the 60s to near 70. We did have a weather front pass through, and winds are northerly today, and there's cooler air coming down from eastern Canada. So still above normal temperatures in the upper 40s and low 50s around here at midday, but we're not going to 60s again as that cooler air continues to push on southward. Now, all of the action continues to remain out in the west, where we have a lot of heavy rain that has moved into California as a major storm sits offshore and pumps up moisture. But this time around, it's more in central California toward the northern part of the state. Here's San Francisco here, and there's heavy snows going on in the mountains as you move toward the east in the Sierra Nevadas, and then on up north and east of there. And there's also quite a bit of action in terms of some rain and heavy rains moving into the Pacific Northwest, specifically into the state of Washington along the coast, with some lighter precipitation going on inland and spreading over into Idaho. And all of this, as we look at the satellite loop, and I'll update it for you. I mean, in terms of the signature on the satellite loop, this is certainly not as impressive as the storm that went into Southern California last week. You can see the turning here on the satellite. There is a fairly somewhat well-developed circulation here aloft, at least, and that's pumping up this feed of moisture. But again, most of it going further north. There's not that much going on in the south. And then the storm from Friday is now producing moisture that's running up northward through the plain states, but nothing in terms of any kind of big development at the surface. And there's that heavy rain that's moving up into the Pacific Northwest. Now, I was kind of looking at things over last night, and a couple of things that kind of popped into my head in terms of the overall pattern. The Pacific North America Index is off the wall negative for much of the next two plus weeks. And when the index is positive, you have a big ridge in the west. When the index is negative, you have a very deep trough in the west. And in this instance, the tendency for a deep trough in the upper layers of the atmosphere continues. But, we had this signature through a good portion of January, and that did not prevent a couple of snowfalls from occurring in January, specifically one that produced upwards to 10 inches along some coastal areas around New Jersey and Long Island and southern New England. Well, the one thing that kind of stands out to me now is that the Eastern Pacific oscillation, the change in pressures in the Eastern Pacific, that goes negative, and that usually favors a colder scheme of weather across the United States. And it does go strongly negative for a while, beginning in 2 days. Now, it takes time for that to work into the atmosphere, but it does, at least to me, signal a colder profile across the United States, specifically the Midwest and East. But I think it's going to be on the order of the way it has been so far. And I think this opens the door for the possibility of a couple of late season snowfalls during the first 2 weeks of March. Making a very broad statement here. I'm not sure again at this point what the specifics are, but we're going to take a look at weather models now and see where they take us. And we'll start with the actually, I think I want to start with the NAM, and we'll look at the west. And let me just get into a nice tight region here for the western United States. And you can see here's that first system pouring in that moisture into California. This is right now pretty much, and then all through into tonight and through the first part of tomorrow, you got that low. Here's low pressure that's sitting east of Oregon that's lifting northward, and here comes the next one right behind it. That's a little stronger. So this prolongs the rain into at least the first half of Tuesday in California with some heavy snows, and then that moves inland, and finally weather conditions start to improve there on Wednesday. But you start to see the flow starts to come down more from the northwest than the west. So I think that might be key to what happens there going forward. And ultimately now those weather systems that are coming into the west are going to have a role in what happens here in the east over time. I'll just back up the one coming in now, and you can see there's low pressure that finds its way up into the Texas-Oklahoma panhandle. We'll show you on the wider view later. But here comes another system into California this coming weekend. And this one produces rain and some heavy snows again in the Sierra Nevadas. And also the snow area shifts a little further south with this one, with that very deep trough signaled by the PNA, the Pacific North America Index. It would tend to bring colder air further south into California with each one of these storms. And here's another one, a weaker one that comes down around the end of the month. And that makes a low that goes into southern Colorado. So we're going to now shift emphasis here and go. Let's go back to the U.S. Then we're going to look at the upper air in a little bit. But here's the setup here in the east. So we've got this cooler air that's in for the next 2 days, and then we're going to start warming up on Wednesday. Low pressure goes across the Gulf states and doesn't come up here. So we've got this weather front that's approaching from the north. So winds are going to go westerly here later in the day on Wednesday. Should be able to get into the 60s if we have a fair amount of sun. And then Thursday, to me, looks like we could go to 70 or better with record highs before a front tries to kind of ease on through. And it may not make it very far because we've got this low that's coming out of Kansas and then runs up to Wisconsin. This looks like it's going to produce some decent snows for parts of northern Colorado, Nebraska, into Iowa. Actually produces a pretty good snowstorm in Iowa late this week and into southeastern Minnesota and Wisconsin as that low runs up into northern Michigan. So I think this is a western Great Lakes event. And we get a warm front that moves through here, so it probably produces some showers here at some point on Saturday. And then the front goes through and it turns a little colder for the weekend and the next week. And you'll notice that, part of what's out in the plains, a piece of that is going to try and come out. Not showing another deep storm going to the lakes, by the way. The models have kind of changed on this. And now it's just got a weaker system with a little bit of rain or wet snow here on the 28th. I mean, I don't know how much this is going to be. It looks like if this were to happen, it's a light event. But the GFS has another low already lined up. And this one is going to be coming out during the first few days of March and heading toward the northeast or east-northeast, depending on what the upper air looks like. So why don't we take a look at that? It's all very interesting how this all evolves over time, and especially with respect to the upper air, how it's been so different from what we've been used to over the last number of years with this persistent ridge here in the eastern states. So here's the current upper air. So let's take a look at what this is telling us. So we've got big ridge just to our west. There's a trough that's moving through off the east coast. So that is the reason why it's a little cooler here. And then you've got the leftovers from Friday's storm sitting out, moving into the plains. And here we have that that endless Pacific jet that continues to pump in storm after storm into the west, but no polar connection here at all. If you notice, everything is pretty much just maybe a little bit of that little cool push here, but the real cold air is stuck way up near the poles and on the other side in Europe and Siberia. Okay, so then we move it along as we go through the week, and you see with the tendency for the trough to be in the west. Here we have 1, 2, 3. There's a big upper high here. Again, that Pacific jet, very dominant. There's a polar flow way up in Canada, but not coming down here. So we're going to move that along. And now we move into next week. And you can start to see, now at this point, this is where it does start to get a little colder here in the eastern states, because you do have a bit of a polar flow there. And you've got all these systems in the west that just keep coming down one after another. And getting involved into the flow. Now, What the key, I think, is going to be going forward is something that's been showing up all along, is that ridge in the east, which gets flattened here to some degree. So now, you've got a little bit of a polar flow, and you're going to have these weather systems that are going to try and move along it. And, basically we'll see how it plays out. I'm going to go back. This is the new run of the GFS. I want to go back one run because we don't have enough of this at the moment. But even from last night's run, it does have a bit of a colder look. Now, again, when I say colder, that's relatively speaking. We're still not talking about anything outrageous, and it's only going to be within the same frame of reference that what we've had for the entire winter. And, of course, the model continues. The GFS for several runs does eventually want to develop some sort of blocking here in the Atlantic, but it's been doing this for over a week, and it just seems to keep putting it off longer and longer, so I don't know how real that is. But, it's kind of an interesting setup for the longer term where you've got low pressure out in the Atlantic and then low pressure out here in the western part of the Pacific, and a bit of a ridge here in eastern Canada, but the flow is not exceptionally warm here by any stretch of the imagination. So it does offer up some possibilities for storminess and a more active weather pattern overall as we move into the first couple of weeks of March, which, by the way, would be very much in line with the seasonal, the climatology of the season, because March, can be an extremely volatile and an extremely stormy month. By looking at history, there have been some rather strong and powerful storms that have occurred all around the United States, from, depending on what the weather setups have been one way or another. Here's one last look at the new GFS model as we take a look at this going into next week. And now you have this next low that wants to come out. Looks like it wants to track a little further south on this run. We'll see. At this point, it may start to make more of a hook toward the northeast, but at least through the middle of next week, you've got the low still pretty much moving straight eastward. So I'll be curious to see how this winds up playing out once we have enough of the long range to look at it. So, I kind of thought that we'd see some chances in the first part of March. It seems like the model wants to be evolving that way. In the West, looks like an active pattern as well, because the system from Saturday, you can see how it moves up into the Rockies. Doesn't really show much development initially, but then it finally gets something going here. This is for the middle of next week, and now it's got a low, as you see, down into central Indiana. So it's probably going to want to hook this up and cut it into the Ohio Valley and take it west of the Appalachians, which would not be at all a big surprise. But hey, it's showing some accumulating snows of consequence for Chicago, which hasn't seen anything of consequence since the middle of December. So it'll be something to watch. And then more action in the west, and there'll be action here in the east as well. So we'll leave it here for the time being. Thank you for being here on my YouTube channel, my returning subscribers. Thanks very much, and appreciate your comments and observations, as well as any suggestions you might have. Also, welcome to my new subscribers, and for those of you who are here for the first time, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's absolutely free, and you'll get a notification every time a new video comes up. For those of you in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, and Hudson Valley area, you can download my weather app and subscribe to my forecast. The app is free, and the subscriptions for the forecast is just $1 a month. Again, that's for New York City, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, the Hudson Valley, and eastern Pennsylvania. So right in this area here. And everybody have a great President's Day. I hope you had a great holiday weekend. And I have to head to work today, so we will be on our way shortly. So we'll see you on video chat for another video tomorrow.